Okay, so we've looked at all three of our 2D transformation function calls. Let's talk about some common behaviors that exist between all of them. The first is that anytime we're using multiple transformation calls like we are here, the order is actually really important. And using the same three function calls in a different order would give us different results. So let's put that into practice here. And let's see what happens if I take this translate. I'm just going to cut and paste down below scale. So you can see I don't see anything here. Let's go ahead and Command Z to undo that, or Control Z. And you can see if I put my translate in the middle here, I can still see my graphics, but I'm getting a different result. So unfortunately, there's not really one correct order for how to apply your 2D transformation function calls. It really just depends on how you want things to move on screen. So you really need to think through what needs to happen and when. Now, another common property is that anytime we're making a function call to scale, rotate, or translate, those changes will apply to any shapes that are drawn subsequently. So that's why all of these shapes are inheriting the changes to the coordinate system that we're making with these three function calls. In addition to that, if we make multiple calls to the same transform function, those changes will compound on top of each other. So for example, if we added another scale function call here, let's go ahead and just do scale 2 again. Those two scale functions are compounding with one another. And when we have multiple scales, the scaling factors multiply together. So calling scale with a factor of 2 twice is the same as calling scale once with a factor of 4. And we can see how that looks here. So let's go ahead and change that back to 2. If we had multiple calls to translate or multiple calls to rotate, they'd operate very similarly. The difference is that those argument values would add together rather than multiplying together. Now, luckily, we do have some tools in P5 to override some of those default transformation behaviors. Anytime that we're making function calls to translate, rotate, or scale, those changes are saved in P5's memory as something called a transformation matrix. And we can manipulate that matrix and make temporary transformation matrix with the push and pop function calls. So those allow us to selectively apply our transformations to just parts of our P5 code and not everything. Let's go ahead in our code here. And let's say that I want my scale factor to only apply to that grid image and the rectangle, but not the text or the ellipse. So I can go ahead up before scale and just type in push, open parentheses, close parentheses. Then after my rectangle function call, I'll type pop, open parentheses, close parentheses, and a semicolon. So I'll just kind of rearrange my code here so we can see a little bit more clearly what's going on. So when I use that push function call, that's creating a temporary transformation matrix. So temporary holding place for our scale to live just while my grid image and my rectangle are being drawn. Then when I call pop, that temporary transformation matrix is thrown away. And that's why we're only getting that scaling applying to the rectangle and the grid, but not the text or the ellipse. Last but not least, we can take a look at making our transformations interactive or animated. And we do that by simply replacing any of the arguments we're feeding into either translate, rotate, or scale with variables. So I'm going to get rid of my push and pop here just to simplify a bit. Then let's go ahead and switch out the static angle measurement that I'm feeding into my rotate function call with a variable. So I'll use a built-in system variable here, and it's called mouse x. And that's just going to give us the horizontal position of wherever my mouse is and convert that into an angle. So you can see as I move my mouse from left to right, I get a different mouse position, which is converted into a different angle, and that gives me a different rotation.